The truth is, some of the greatest performances in cinema history didn't get the applause they deserved. Not because they weren't powerful, but because they were too quiet, too subtle, or simply overshadowed by louder names and bigger headlines. You've probably seen these movies, maybe even loved them, but missed the brilliance hiding in plain sight. This isn't about the usual Oscar winners everyone talks about. This is about the performances that linger, the ones that stay with you long after the credits roll, even if nobody else noticed. And once you see them from this perspective, you won't be able to unsee it. Let's uncover the most underrated performances of all time. Number 20, Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler. There's something deeply unsettling about watching someone who never blinks emotionally, and that's exactly what Jake Gyllenhaal delivers here. As Lou Bloom, he doesn't play a villain in the traditional sense. He plays ambition without morality, and that's what makes it terrifying. What's fascinating is how controlled the performance is. No dramatic breakdowns, no loud outbursts, just this eerie calmness that slowly suffocates the audience. Every smile feels rehearsed, every word calculated, like he's constantly learning how to be human by watching others. And yet, despite how transformative this role was, his physical transformation, the intensity in his eyes, it didn't get the level of recognition it deserved during awards season. Maybe because it was too uncomfortable, too real. But once you notice the layers, the body language, the cold charisma, you realize this wasn't just acting. It was a masterclass in restraint and psychological depth. Number 19, Toni Collette in Hereditary. Grief is messy. It's loud, ugly, and unpredictable. And Toni Collette doesn't hold back for a second. In a genre that often relies on jump scares, she brings something far more disturbing. Emotional realism. Her portrayal of a mother unraveling after tragedy feels so raw that it almost becomes difficult to watch. There's a dinner scene in particular, where every word cuts like glass. No background music needed, just pure, unfiltered pain. What makes this performance underrated is how horror films are often overlooked in major award conversations. But strip away the genre, and what you're left with is one of the most intense depictions of grief and psychological collapse ever put on screen. She doesn't just act, she bleeds emotion. And somehow that brilliance slipped under the radar. Number 18, Robert Pattinson in Good Time. Before the world started taking him seriously again, Robert Pattinson quietly delivered one of the most chaotic and immersive performances of the decade. In Good Time, he disappears completely into Connie Nikas, a desperate, morally blurred character spiraling through one long, disastrous night. What's remarkable isn't just the energy, it's the authenticity. He feels like someone you might actually run into in the worst part of a city at 3 a.m. There's no vanity here, no attempt to look cool or redeemable. He's messy, impulsive, and constantly making things worse. And yet, you can't look away. At the time, many people were still associating him with the Twilight Saga, which overshadowed just how fearless this performance was. But looking back, this was the moment he proved he was far more than people assumed. Number 17, Amy Adams in Arrival. Sometimes, the most powerful performances are the quietest ones, and Amy Adams embodies that perfectly. In a film filled with extraterrestrial mystery, she grounds everything in something deeply human: emotion, memory, and acceptance. Her performance isn't about big moments, it's about subtle shifts, a look, a pause, a realization that slowly unfolds. What's incredible is how she carries the emotional weight of the entire film without ever demanding attention. You feel everything she feels, even before you fully understand what's happening. Despite universal praise, she was shockingly absent from major award nominations. And that's what makes it one of the most talked about snubs in modern cinema. Because once you truly see her performance, you realize it was doing far more than it seemed on the surface. Number 16, Hugh Jackman in Prisoners. What happens when desperation takes over morality? Hugh Jackman answers that question in a way that's almost unbearable to watch. As Keller Dover, a father searching for his missing daughter, he doesn't play a hero. He plays a man slowly breaking under pressure. And that's what makes it so powerful. There's rage in his performance, but also fear, guilt, helplessness. You can see it in the way he breathes, the way his voice cracks, the way his decisions become darker with each passing moment. This isn't the charismatic, polished version audiences were used to seeing. This is raw, uncomfortable, and deeply human. And yet, despite delivering one of the most emotionally complex performances of his career, it rarely gets mentioned among the greats. But once you revisit it, it's impossible to ignore. Number 15, Oscar Isaac in Inside Llewyn Davis. There's a certain kind of loneliness that doesn't scream, it just quietly exists. And Oscar Isaac captures that feeling with haunting precision. In Inside Llewyn Davis, he plays a struggling folk musician navigating a world that seems almost indifferent to his existence. What makes this performance so underrated is how unapologetically real it is. Llewyn isn't particularly likable. He's stubborn, often selfish, and stuck in a cycle of his own making. But somehow, you still feel for him. Isaac doesn't rely on dramatic breakdowns or emotional monologues. Instead, he builds the character through subtle details. The tired look in his eyes, the passive-aggressive tone in conversations, the quiet frustration that simmers beneath every interaction. And then there's the music. Every song he performs isn't just sung, it's lived. You can feel the weight of his failures and the flicker of hope in every note. The brilliance lies in how understated everything is. There's no big redemption arc, no triumphant moment where everything changes. Life just continues. And that's exactly what makes it so powerful. It reflects a reality most films avoid, the idea that sometimes talent isn't enough. Despite critical acclaim, this performance often gets overshadowed when people discuss great portrayals of artists on screen. But if you look closely, you'll see something extraordinary. A character so authentic, it feels less like acting and more like you're watching someone's real life unfold. Number 14, Rosamund Pike in Gone Girl. Villains are usually loud, expressive, and easy to identify. But what if the most dangerous person in the room is the one smiling calmly at you? That's exactly what Rosamund Pike delivers in Gone Girl. Her portrayal of Amy Dunn is chilling, not because she's explosive, but because she's controlled. Every word, every gesture, every expression feels meticulously planned. She doesn't just manipulate people within the story, she manipulates the audience as well. What makes this performance so fascinating is its duality. On one hand, Amy presents herself as the perfect wife, composed, intelligent, and charming. On the other, there's a darker, calculating side that slowly reveals itself. Pike navigates this shift with such precision that you almost don't notice when the illusion starts to crack. There's a monologue in the film, often referred to as the cool girl speech, that perfectly encapsulates the character. It's sharp, biting, and disturbingly honest. And Pike delivers it with a calm intensity that makes it even more unsettling. Even though she received an Academy Award nomination, this performance still feels underrated in the larger conversation about iconic villains. Perhaps because it doesn't fit the traditional mold. There's no chaos, no unpredictability, just cold, calculated perfection. And that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. Number 13, Ethan Hawke in First Reformed. Some performances don't demand your attention. They quietly pull you in until you realize you can't look away. Ethan Hawke does exactly that in First Reformed. He plays a pastor grappling with faith, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of existential dread. And instead of externalizing those emotions, he internalizes them. The result is a performance that feels deeply personal, almost intrusive, like you're witnessing thoughts that were never meant to be seen. What's remarkable is how restrained it is. Hawke speaks softly, moves deliberately, and often says more with silence than with words. His journal entries, delivered in voiceover, add another layer, revealing a mind slowly unraveling under the weight of its own questions. There's a growing tension throughout the film, not driven by action but by introspection. You can feel something building, even when nothing dramatic is happening. And when it finally reaches its breaking point, it hits with a quiet but devastating impact. Despite receiving critical praise, Hawke was largely overlooked during award season, a decision many still question. Because this isn't just a performance, it's a study of isolation, belief, and the fragile line between hope and despair. It's subtle, yes, but incredibly powerful for those willing to truly engage with it. Number 12, Scarlett Johansson in Lost in Translation. Sometimes, the most meaningful connections are the ones that never fully happen, and Scarlett Johansson captures that beautifully in Lost in Translation. At just 17, she delivers a performance filled with a level of emotional maturity that's rare even among seasoned actors. Her character, Charlotte, is drifting, caught between youth and adulthood, unsure of who she is or where she belongs. What makes this portrayal so compelling is its subtlety. There are no dramatic declarations or intense confrontations. Instead, it's all in the small moments. The way she looks out a window, the hesitation in her voice, the quiet curiosity in her interactions. Her chemistry with Bill Murray is another standout element. Their relationship feels natural, unforced, and deeply human. It's not about romance in the traditional sense. It's about understanding, about finding comfort in someone who sees you without needing explanations. Despite the film's acclaim, Johansson's performance often gets overshadowed in discussions about the movie. But if you pay attention, you'll realize she's the emotional core holding everything together. It's a reminder that sometimes less really is more. Number 11. Jake Gyllenhaal in Zodiac. Obsessions in films are usually loud and dramatic, but in Zodiac, Jake Gyllenhaal portrays something far more unsettling. A slow, consuming fixation that quietly takes over a life. As Robert Graysmith, a cartoonist turned amateur investigator, Gyllenhaal begins with a sense of curiosity and intrigue. But as the story progresses, that curiosity transforms into obsession. And what makes it so effective is how gradual it feels. There's no clear turning point, just a series of small steps that lead him deeper into the unknown. He doesn't play Graysmith as a traditional hero. He's awkward, often unsure of himself, and clearly out of his depth. But that's what makes him relatable. You see a regular person getting pulled into something far bigger than he anticipated. The performance is filled with nuance, subtle shifts in tone, body language, and energy that reflect the character's mental state. By the end, there's a quiet intensity to him that wasn't there before. Despite being part of a critically acclaimed film directed by David Fincher, this performance rarely gets singled out, but it should, because it captures something deeply human, the way curiosity can slowly evolve into something all-consuming, without you even realizing it. Number 10. Christian Bale in The Prestige. Obsession can wear many faces, but in The Prestige, Christian Bale gives us one that's almost impossible to fully decode. At first glance, his performance feels controlled, even restrained, but as the story unfolds, you begin to notice something off. There's a duality in the way he speaks, reacts, even exists within scenes, and that's where the brilliance lies. Without giving too much away, Bale isn't just playing a character, he's playing layers within that character, constantly shifting between them with such subtlety that many viewers don't even catch it on the first watch. What makes this performance underrated is how overshadowed it is by the film's twists and overall narrative. People remember the ending, the rivalry, the spectacle, but they rarely stop to appreciate just how technically precise Bale's acting is here. He balances emotion and deception in a way that mirrors the film's core theme, illusion. Every expression feels intentional, every reaction slightly calculated. And once you understand what he's actually doing, the entire performance transforms into something even more impressive. It's not loud, it's not showy, but it's incredibly intricate, and that's exactly why it deserves more recognition. Number 9. Viola Davis in Doubt. Sometimes a single scene is enough to leave a permanent mark, and Viola Davis proves that with devastating impact. With limited screen time in Doubt, she delivers a performance so powerful that it completely shifts the emotional weight of the film. As a mother caught in an impossible situation, Davis brings a level of vulnerability and strength that feels almost too real to watch. There's a rawness to her delivery, her voice trembling, her eyes filled with conflict, that pulls you in instantly. You don't just hear her words, you feel the weight behind them. And what makes it even more compelling is the complexity of her character. She isn't simply right or wrong, she's navigating a situation where every choice comes with consequences. Despite earning an Academy Award nomination, this performance often gets overlooked in broader conversations, perhaps because of its brevity. But that's exactly what makes it extraordinary. In just a few minutes, she creates a character that feels fully lived in, fully human. It's a reminder that impact isn't about screen time, it's about truth. Number 8. Ryan Gosling in Drive. Silence can be louder than words, and Ryan Gosling turns that silence into something unforgettable. In Drive, he plays a character who barely speaks, but somehow says everything. Known simply as the driver, his performance relies almost entirely on presence, body language, and subtle expression. And that's what makes it so compelling. There's a calmness to him, almost robotic at times. But beneath that stillness, you can sense something darker, something volatile. And when that side finally surfaces, it's both shocking and completely believable. What's fascinating is how Gosling makes you project meaning onto the character. Because he gives you so little, you start filling in the gaps yourself. Every glance, every pause, every slight movement becomes significant. Despite the film's cult following, this performance is rarely discussed among the greats. Maybe because it doesn't follow traditional acting conventions. There are no big speeches, no emotional breakdowns, just quiet intensity. But that's exactly what makes it stand out. It proves that sometimes doing less can achieve so much more. Number 7, Gyllenhaal in Enemy. What if you came face to face with yourself? Not metaphorically, but literally. That's the unsettling premise of Enemy, and Jake Gyllenhaal takes it to a whole new level. Playing dual roles, he creates two characters who look identical but feel completely different. One is anxious, withdrawn, constantly on edge. The other is more confident, but carries an underlying menace. And the way Gyllenhaal differentiates them isn't through obvious changes, it's through subtle shifts in posture, tone, and energy. You can tell who's who instantly, even without context. That's how precise the performance is. It's not just about playing two people. It's about exploring identity, paranoia, and the fragile sense of self. The film itself is abstract, almost dreamlike, which may be why this performance doesn't get as much mainstream recognition. But if you look closely, what he's doing here is incredibly complex. He's not just acting, he's creating two distinct psychological spaces within the same physical form. And that's something very few actors can pull off convincingly. Number 6, Jake Gyllenhaal in Nocturnal Animals. Pain doesn't always explode outward. Sometimes it just quietly consumes you from within. And Jake Gyllenhaal captures that internal devastation with chilling precision. In Nocturnal Animals, he delivers a layered performance that exists across different emotional timelines. On one level, there's vulnerability, a man dealing with rejection, regret, and unresolved feelings. On another, there's something much darker unfolding within the story he's written. What's remarkable is how seamlessly he transitions between these layers, making each one feel distinct yet connected. You can see the emotional scars in his expressions, the weight of past decisions lingering in every moment. This isn't a performance built on dramatic highs, it's built on emotional undercurrents, a quiet sadness that never fully goes away, no matter how much time passes. Despite the film's critical attention, his work here often gets overshadowed by its visual style and narrative structure. But if you focus on the performance, you'll see something incredibly nuanced. It's not just about heartbreak, it's about how that heartbreak shapes who you become. Number 5, Joaquin Phoenix in Her. Falling in love with a voice sounds strange, until Joaquin Phoenix makes it feel completely real. In Her, he strips away everything. No grand gestures, no dramatic intensity, just pure emotional vulnerability. His performance lives in the smallest details. The softness in his voice, the quiet smiles, the loneliness that lingers even in happy moments. Acting opposite an unseen presence is incredibly difficult, yet he creates a connection so believable that you forget it's not physical. What makes this underrated is how internal it is. There are no explosive scenes, just a deeply human portrayal of love, loss, and connection in a modern world. It's subtle, but it hits deeper than most loud performances ever could. Number 4, Leonardo DiCaprio in The Departed. Stress, paranoia, fear. Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't just show it, he lives it. In The Departed, his performance feels like a ticking time bomb ready to explode at any second. Unlike his more celebrated roles, this one is raw and unpolished. You can see the anxiety in his eyes, hear it in his voice, feel it in every interaction. He's constantly on edge, and that tension transfers directly to the audience. What's surprising is how often this role gets overshadowed, even though it's one of his most emotionally intense performances. There's no glamour here, just a man slowly losing control under pressure. And that realism is exactly what makes it unforgettable. Number 3, Jake Gyllenhaal in Brothers Transformation. Isn't always physical, sometimes it's psychological. And Jake Gyllenhaal delivers one of the most haunting emotional shifts in Brothers. As a soldier returning from war, he portrays trauma in a way that feels disturbingly real. The change in his demeanor, from composed to unstable, is gradual, almost uncomfortable to witness. There's a dinner scene where everything unravels, and it's impossible to look away. No overacting, no exaggeration, just raw, unfiltered emotion. Despite how powerful it is, this performance rarely gets mentioned among his best, but once you see it, it stays with you. Number 2, Edward Norton in Primal Fear. Some performances rely on surprise, but Edward Norton becomes the surprise. In Primal Fear, he delivers a debut so controlled, so layered, that it completely redefines the film. At first, he appears fragile, almost innocent, but as the story unfolds, subtle cracks begin to show, and when the truth finally surfaces, it's chilling. What makes this performance special is the precision. Every shift in tone, every change in expression, it's all intentional. Even though he earned recognition, it still feels underrated in conversations about the greatest acting debuts ever. Because this wasn't just impressive, it was unforgettable. Number 1, Heath Ledger in Brokeback Mountain. Sometimes, the loudest emotions are the ones never spoken, and Heath Ledger proves that with heartbreaking subtlety. In Brokeback Mountain, his performance is built on silence, restrained, internalized, and deeply affecting. You can feel everything he's holding back in the way he speaks, the way he looks, the way he exists. It's not about dramatic expression, it's about what's not said. And that's what makes it so powerful. Even though the film received acclaim, Ledger's quiet brilliance often gets overshadowed. But if you truly pay attention, you'll see one of the most emotionally authentic performances ever captured on screen. So here's the real question. How many of these did you actually notice the first time? Because the truth is, great acting isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in silence, in details, in moments most people miss. If this list made you see these performances differently, hit that like button, share it with someone who loves movies, and don't forget to subscribe, because we're just getting started uncovering the brilliance most people overlook.